Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And although I have spent a lot of time planning out this offseason and some potential additional moves since our last episode, haven't really moved forward at all. We're still on January 20th, but I do have a plan in place for how we're going to spend some of the good chunk of money that we have available to us. The first one is going to be kind of playing the system, so to speak, in the game. But we do have a lot riding on getting our fan interest up higher. It is an owner goal that is due by the end of this year, and we've made a small amount of progress thus far this off-season, but it's also an important driver of the economics in the game. So we are going to make an offer to Chris Bryant, who at the age of 37 is still an extremely popular player, and I think he could be a potential platoon guy for us against left-handed pitching. Hopefully that will ensure that his wrecked injury proneness doesn't impact us too much. He can technically play first, third, left, or right. I think to the extent we can just have him in a DH role as much as possible is probably the best thing for everybody. There is, of course, a chance that we'll sign him to a one-year deal, get a bump in fan interest now, and when he leaves a year from now, we'll lose everything that we gained. But that is a problem that we will deal with next offseason if it happens that way. In a perfect scenario, we'd love him to play out this year for us, be relatively productive in 200 at-bats or so, and decide that that's a nice way to end his career and have him retire. He will be 38 by this time next year, so it's certainly possible, particularly with the struggles he's had over the last couple of seasons. Interestingly, he's actually willing to accept a minor league contract, which becomes a major league guaranteed contract. But if we sign him to that, we're not going to get the fan interest bump that I would like to potentially get. So we're actually going to offer him a major league. He says he wants to be in the starting lineup. Come on, Chris. Let's think about who you really are at this point. We'll offer him a guaranteed contract for, we'll try 1.6 million. I have a feeling he's going to want more than that, but he was just talking about a minor league contract that's not even guaranteed. So you would think this would not be a completely unpalatable option to him. Wants more money. Of course he does. And he wants to be guaranteed a spot in the starting lineup. He's a little delusional about what he is at this point. I mean, he's been in Colorado and putting up WRC pluses that are well below league average. We'll offer him $2 million with no promised role. He wants to be guaranteed a spot in the starting lineup. I'm not going to put myself in a position where he's going to be whining and complaining all year. That kind of defeats the purpose of bringing him on board. So we'll actually offer him an extra 20 grand, 2.1 million, no specified role. If this doesn't work out, we may need to look to whatever our plan B is as far as bringing on an extremely popular player. He's still insistent he's a starting lineup type of guy. I don't want him to be a negative influence in the clubhouse. So, unfortunately, we may be looking for different options other than Chris Bryant. And when we look at potential everyday players who are extremely popular locally who are still on the market, there's only two of them left, Bryant and Byron Buxton, but Buxton's demands have come down. We talked about him a couple of episodes ago. He's also wrecked physically. He's not quite as old. Still looks like a guy who could be a useful hitter against left-handed pitching, and he still is more than competent in the outfield. Definitely not a great center fielder defensively at this point. He's coming off a year when he had 30 homers, 30 doubles, and 101 ribbies for Minnesota, put up a 104 WRC+. His local popularity is extremely popular, only popular nationally. We may not get quite the bump that we would have gotten from Mr. Bryant. I think the question is just whether Buxton also wants to be assured a role in the starting lineup, which could be a bit trickier for us to pull off, but I'd feel better about saying that to Buxton than to Bryant, because certainly, even though Buxton does not have a great profile against right-handed pitching, he still can hit home runs. He still has decent gap power, although his running speed isn't what it used to be. And I could at least make a argument to start him every day over Luis Lara. Whereas Bryant, there's no way I can argue starting him at first base over Mr. Soderstrom. So let's see what Buxton is thinking. Previously, I offered him 1 year at $2.5 million. Now, as we talked about, he's looking for 1 year at $4.16 million. So we're getting closer. He was way over this before. He's not going to like that there's not a guaranteed starting role in his future if he decides to sign with us. But will $3.75 million be enough for him to get over that? He really wants the starting lineup. I feel like Buxton, coming off of a 30 home run, 100 ribby year, even though the batting average was not incredible, is probably going to get offended and disengage with us if we don't offer him the role that he wants and close to the money that he wants. So we're going to offer him the starting lineup spot, and we'll deal with the ramifications of that in the clubhouse. Hopefully we'll be able to get him enough playing time. He is wrecked physically, so it's also conceivable that he ends up hurt at some point if we're playing him every day, which is not great. But again, Buxton, as much as anything, is hopefully going to help with the fan interest bringing him on board. He's definitely a more useful player at this point in his career than Bryant is. There's part of me that wants to try to give him a multi-year offer just in case it works out well. But I'm not going to go crazy. We'll offering him $3.85 million. We'll tell him that he's going to be in the starting lineup. And Buxton is willing to at least consider that offer. Certainly a more complete player than Bryant at this point. He's more expensive, but I think he also brings more to the table, especially with his defensive skill. Not that he's a great Gold Glove defensive center fielder anymore, but I think he's still competent out there. And if we do get him on board, we could try to have him play a little bit of right or left in spring training to give ourselves a little more positional versatility, and maybe that'll help us get him into the lineup a little more often as well. And I mentioned at the end of the last episode also that I didn't necessarily love the options at the top end of the starting pitcher market that were left, although there are still some interesting relievers. It's just a matter of hopefully the prices on some of them coming down. But we have been looking in the trade market, and there's a guy who's in the final year of his contract that I think could certainly help our pitching staff. Probably will go right into the rotation. and what we have to pay to potentially bring him on board is not that much at all. He's a guy who's in the final year of his contract and doesn't seem like he is big into the plans of his current team. And that's Nick Lodolo with the Atlanta Braves, coming off of a rough year where he led the National League in losses with an 8-16 record, put up an ERA of close to 6, and he's had an ERA of over 5 in 2 of the last 3 years. 74 ERA plus and a 113 FIP minus last year. So he certainly has not been good since the Braves traded for him with the Reds 3 years ago. Over the course of his major league career, he's pretty close to a league average type pitcher, but it would give us another lefty, which I think will play well in Oakland, given that right-handed batters have some struggles with our park. We've got a very high scouting report accuracy on him, but it is from 3 months ago at this point. So I'm going to wait to get that report back, but you can see we don't have to give up too much. We have to basically just give up some 4A players in our organization. And the thing that really gets this deal done is giving up $250,000 in international pool bonus room. And that's what kind of keeps us from having to give up someone who we think is going to be an impact player for us this upcoming season. I don't love conceptually giving up international bonus pool money, but you may remember we signed our top choice and the choice of the people, Sergio Palomares, right at the end of the last episode, and he took up all but $1.95 million of our money. So that would still leave us with $1.7 million. And we have made offers to a couple of lower range IAFA players, reliever Hermosa Armenta and a catcher Byron Brain, who are well within the money that we still have available, even if we trade away. So I'm thinking seriously about this Lodolo trade. I am going to wait till we get the updated scouting report on him just to make sure nothing funky has happened over these last 3 months since we got a scouting report on him in early October. He is closing in on his 31st birthday, also known as the witching hour in OOTP 25, although I think they have addressed that at this point. So we will see what happens with our scouting report on Lodolo, as well as what happens with the offer that we made to Byron Buxton in the coming weeks. And we've officially made it to the start of the preseason. Budget's still going to be at $126 million for this upcoming season, which is pretty much where we've been for, I think, 4 years in a row now. Andrew Vaughn, who we made an offer to earlier, has reached back out to us. I don't think, unless we have injuries, there's room on the roster for both Buxton and Vaughn. Buxton certainly coming off of more productive seasons than Vaughn has been. I think he's an interesting fallback opportunity as a right-handed hitter who could play first or a corner outfield spot for us, but doesn't bring the same type of popularity and potential boost in fan interest to the table that either Buxton or Chris Bryant does. So probably will consider Vaughn as a fallback option at this point. Buxton, for what it's worth, says that he likes our offer right now, but if someone else gives him something better, he may very well move on to them. And we have locked Mr. Buxton up. Overall fan interest increases noticeably. Let's see exactly what that means. And noticeably is a 1-point boost. So yes, I guess that is noticeable. and it is better than nothing. But we will keep that in mind, that we got this massive 1-point boost from Mr. Buxton to sign with us for this season. I wonder what the ramifications will be if and when he leaves after this year. And we have gotten the 2 additional international amateur free agents signed. The reliever Hermosa Armenta, really a slider and fastball guy, and those pitches are going to really have to develop fully for him to have any chance of reaching the stuff that we think he can have. Left-handed pitcher, presumably his velocity we think can increase significantly to get him to that type of stuff. Pretty average movement and control, not a big-time prospect, but does give us a little more depth in the lowest levels of our organization. We also signed catcher Byron Brain. Pretty interesting potential bat for a catcher with potentially well above average power and eye. Not great defensively, but he does have some positive personality traits and he's durable. Thought that the Barbadian national was a pretty interesting guy to bring on board for just a $350,000 bonus. So we spent $350 on Brain. Armenta was more than that, $550. Both of them were asking for significantly more. I think Armenta was asking for $850, and I think Brain had been asking for $550. So our initial offers to both of them were under what they were looking for. We've got the 2 of them signed to supplement Mr. Palomares, and even if we do end up trying to make a play for Mr. Lodolo with some of our IAFA money, we still should have some left to hopefully add another player or 2 in the coming weeks. And we've got our updated scouting report on Lodolo. I don't know if his movement is quite where we thought it was before, but still looks like a potential 4-pitch guy. Good stamina, good at holding on runners, lefty, above average stuff, average movement, slightly above average control at a very primitive level. Little bit worse than he was before. The stuff's not that 65 that we thought it was, but it's still above average. And he's gone from 3-star overall to 2.5-star overall, so probably not worth quite as much to us, but it looks almost like that scouting report in October was the one that was kind of a aberration from who we have thought Lodolo has been over the past couple of years. I think that he's interesting for a lot of reasons. He would likely be one of our top 5 starters, would potentially give us a second lefty in the rotation along with Jackson Ferris, who we also acquired this offseason. Bringing him on board lets us use a lot of the money that we have to spend this year that we haven't really found the right free agent for. And he is a guy who is going to be a compensation eligible free agent after this season. I don't know, unless he has a really good year for us, that we're going to be willing to give him an $18.9 million qualifying offer. Probably won't. But if he has a great year for us and he says he's looking for crazy money after this season, we might get a little bit of compensation back for him on that front also. So going to take a look and see what the Braves are thinking about him now. I'd love it if the price was a little bit lower at this point. Not necessarily expecting that it will be. Yeah, even at the 5%, they're not willing to do it now. Ooh, even when we take it down to nothing, that international bonus pool money was probably more useful to them 6 days ago than it is today, so it seems like that's caused us a little bit of an issue. Yeah, you can see that we had this deal done at 5% with those 3 players and the $250,000 bonus money, but that bonus money is a lot less interesting to them now, at least that amount, and they're looking for a pretty significant player for us to add in to get this deal done. Now, the thing that we can do, though, is since we've signed a couple more players, we can bump that international bonus pool up to 500,000. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like they care all that much anymore. Ugh, I felt like we had a really nice deal for him, and I was worried about that scouting report, but I wasn't necessarily thinking that the very early stages of the IAFA period are when that money will be most valuable. If we bump it up to 750,000, it really doesn't change the dynamic at all, unfortunately. So probably we're too patient and tried to cross all our T's and dot all our I's before we made this move for Lodolo, and it may end up costing us. I'm definitely not going to include one of these bigger, more important players in the deal, but if we can add in a decent prospect, I'll certainly think about it. So we've got a deal together for Lodolo. It's a much higher price than we were paying only 6 days ago, so I think that's a good lesson that the time value of that international amateur free agent money is pretty significant, and if you can do what we did this past year and get the guy that we really like signed early and then go look for trades in those early days, it does seem like that money has a lot of value when there's a lot of players on the market, and then it drops off as the options get lesser. Have to add in Austin Hayes, which we're fine doing. Nate Nankill, a 26-year-old who's not a big-time prospect. And we had to add in another $500,000 of international bonus pool money rather than the $250,000 that would have gotten this deal done with fewer players just a couple of days ago. But we've got the money to afford Lodolo. I think he would be an upgrade to our team, and it's not a long-term commitment. And as I said, if he has a great year with us and he's looking for crazy money this offseason, we'll likely be able to get a little bit of draft pick compensation back. Not able to have the Braves keep any of his contract and guarantee that we can get the deal done. So since we've got money to spend this offseason and we haven't spent it on free agents, we're going to spend a big chunk of it by bringing Lodolo on board, and I think he will be probably the second highest priced contract on our team in terms of what we're paying. I think just a couple $100,000 behind Mason Miller. So we're going to bring on another left-handed pitcher, and all of a sudden we've spent a big chunk of the potential cash we had available this past offseason on Buxton as a free agent and Lodolo as a member of our rotation. Check in quickly on the front office stuff. I'm pretty sure Lodolo is going to be our second highest price payer. Yeah, we got $9 million for Miller and then $8.8 for Lodolo. And then the new addition, Byron Buxton, is going to be our third most expensive player this year. So it is still not an particularly high or intimidating payroll here in Oakland. Even with those two additions, we still have the lowest payroll in all of baseball. So I feel like with the addition of the left-handed pitcher Lodolo and the center fielder Buxton, that our 26-man roster, barring injuries, is really starting to shape up. We do have a little bit of money left, and we certainly will probably be taking some more out of scouting and player development before the season actually begins and we kind of lock things in. So we've still got money to add another potential pitcher. I think I'd be looking at some of those relievers if their prices happen to fall over the next month or two as we get through the preseason and into spring training. And even with the $750,000 that we shipped to the Braves to pick up Lodolo, we had made another couple offers, very low levels before we did that, and one of them is on board. Shortstop Edgar Aquino doesn't really look like he's going to be much of a hitter or much of a fielder, but he is a guy with high adaptability and work ethic, and we got him for just $150,000. So he is the fourth IAFA player we've signed this year, and we've still got $150,000 left, as David Molina, who we had also made an offer of the same amount to, is unfortunately for us looking for more money than we can afford at this point, given that we've only got that $150,000 left that we had offered to him before. And we've simmed ahead another few days, and we did end up getting a fifth IAFA player signed. Alejandro Nava used the last $150,000 that we had to spend. Not a big-time prospect, but a guy who looks like he could be a really good influence in the lower levels of our organization, particularly at our DSL team, maybe 2 or 3 years from now when we finally promote him there. So don't think he necessarily is a future in Oakland, but hopefully his positive influence in the clubhouse can help the development and the personalities of some of the real prospects that he'll be playing with in a few years. So we ended up getting 5 guys in the IAFA period this year, used $750,000 of our pool to help bring Lodolo on board. And we also got the top guy on our list in Sergio Palomares. So when all was said and done, I think it was a pretty successful IAFA period for Oakland over the last couple of weeks. And unfortunately, the pool of pitchers has shrunk pretty rapidly over the last couple of weeks. Just DeGrom, who's going to be injured the whole season, Clay Holmes and Jose Soriano still on the market as 3-star or higher overall players. Not really in love with any of them at the prices that they are looking for. We have made some minor league offers to round out our organization. And Patrick Sandoval, who we had made an offer to at the start of free agency, is still on the market. Another lefty who could start or relieve. I think he could be an interesting depth piece for us this year. We had offered him $1.75 million earlier, and now he's only looking for $1.68 million. The only question is he wants to be guaranteed a spot in the starting rotation, which we are certainly not going to do for him at this point, with Miller, Chandler, and Bradish coming back, as well as the additions of Ferris and Black and Lodolo, as well as, to some degree, even Mitch Spence returning from an injury that cost him all of last year. At this point, certainly can't guarantee Sandoval a spot in the starting rotation, and he's not performing at quite the level that Buxton has been recently, so I don't think we'll be tempted to do it. We'll offer him $1.6 million for the year. And he's still playing hardball, which, given that it's February 5th, may come back to haunt Mr. Sandoval. And we've made a number of free agent signings, including bringing Chris Bryant into the organization. We're not going to get the boost. A little bit irrational. We had offered him a guaranteed $2 million major league contract that he refused because he wanted to be guaranteed a spot in the starting lineup. And now he has just signed a pure minor league deal with us. So it's kind of a lose-lose for both of us. He's not getting any guaranteed money, and we are not getting any boost to fan interest from bringing him on board. But he does give us a little bit extra organizational depth. And with spring training just a couple of weeks ago, check in on the development lab, and Drake Baldwin is now excelling in terms of his quality of contact, but you can see everybody else is still frustrated and struggling. So it's conceivable that we have a very unsuccessful development lab for our prospects and our major league players this offseason, unless we get a little bit of positive development over these final couple weeks. And we finally made it to the start of spring training, so we're going to have some decisions to make as far as what our spring training roster will look like. We'll work on that offline. We should be a day away from development lab decision making and finding out how things went. Actually, it's not really decision making, it's just finding out how things went. And it seems very conceivable that Drake Baldwin may be the only successful program we have for this entire offseason, which would be a pretty significant disappointment. But if that is the case, it is what it is. I think we just hope that Roussel Shepard doesn't have a really negative result. And unfortunately, the worst case scenario that we anticipated for our 8 programs happened. 6 of them, no improvement. And in addition to the outstanding result we got from Drake Baldwin, where we think his potential and his current BABIP both improved by around 5 points, a little less than 5 points. We did have a poor result for Roussel Shepard. His avoid K rating dropped by less than 5 points. So that's a very disappointing result for a guy who we picked 4th overall in 2026. Put him through a program for this entire offseason to hopefully help him start being able to hit above 200 in Class A ball. And he comes out of it with an even higher likelihood to strike out than he previously had. So definitely a disappointing performance in the development lab for Roussel Shepard, and honestly, with only 1 successful program out of 8, a pretty wasted offseason in the development lab for this whole Oakland A's franchise when all was said and done. And oddly, Patrick Sandoval, who we made multiple offers to with a guaranteed major league contract this offseason that upset him and he refused, has now signed a minor league contract with us. I do think he could be in the mix to make the major league roster. We're going to put him right into spring training with the rest of our team, and he certainly has a chance to be in our bullpen coming out of spring training. I wouldn't say it's likely at this point, but he's certainly in the mix. And we've made it to the end of spring training relatively healthily. Mason Black, who should be competing for a spot in the rotation, likely will get one. Hamstring soreness, which is going to impact him for 5 days, but he should be ready for his first start of the year, assuming he does end up in the rotation. Cal Quantrill is out with a strained ab. He was really just organizational depth. Unfortunately, Jesus Soto, the lefty reliever, we're waiting to hear about a potential elbow injury from him. That could definitely hurt our left-handed efforts out of the bullpen. If Soto's going to miss significant time, Patrick Sandoval's chance to make the roster probably much improved. No injuries at all to our position players. Fortunately, Cameron Cawley came back from an injury and has been up with us in spring training for a week and a half or so. So hopefully if he makes the roster, he will be ready to go, given the way he's hit over his major league career. Certainly no guarantee that as a 26-year-old at this point he's going to make the roster, although I think he probably will. When all was said and done, was a very good spring for our Oakland A's, a 19-8 record. We won as many games as anybody during the spring, tying with the Giants, interestingly, our Cross Bay rival, for the most wins of any team in spring training. Not going to put a lot of stock in that, but certainly think that this team should be improved from where it was a year ago, and hopefully the better results in spring training this year are an omen of positive things to come when the regular season gets underway in a few days. And as we finish up spring training, the roster cuts have not been incredibly hard this year. We're waiting to find out what happens with Jesus Soto. We mentioned he was diagnosis pending with his elbow. If that ends up being serious, he'll go on the IL, and then we won't have any decisions to make. If Soto's not really hurt all that much, then we'll have a decision between Patrick Sandoval and Brian Wu, both of whom we signed to minor league contracts this spring, as well as Mitch Spence, who's been a starter for us for several years, coming off of a basically lost season due to injuries a year ago. Those are kind of the three guys who are on the bubble, depending on what happens with Soto. Also had a tough decision, as we mentioned, in the rotation. For the time being, we're going to go with newcomer Ferris, Bradish, and Miller, who are returning as our 2 and 3 starters. Newcomer Nick Lodolo, a 4th starter, and holdover Bubba Chandler is our 5th starter. That means that Mason Black, who we made that trade for with the Giants, will be beginning the season in some type of bullpen role. It's possible it could be a relatively prominent role in the bullpen for Black. We'll be figuring out all of the roles for our relievers over the next couple days after we finish up this episode before we begin the season in just a few days. Everyday lineup-wise, we got down to 13 players. Still have to figure out batting orders, but you can see the rough lay of the land here. The final 3 cuts to get down to 13 position players were Rule 5 acquisition Oslevis Basabe, who we sent back to Boston. You may remember that we picked up Hideki Amakura in international free agency this year. We gave him a minor league contract with major league options, so he can opt out 30 days from now, but he still needed a little bit of seasoning to play a couple of other positions, so we're going to play him every day down in AAA, and if we have any injuries, he could very well be up here sometime in April. And the final cut ended up being Chris Bryant, who we sent down to AAA. As we talked about earlier, we ended up signing him to that minor league contract, which kind of defeated purposes for both of us. We didn't get the boost from his popularity by getting to sign him to a major league contract, and he, instead of having a couple $1 million guaranteed, is going to be in the minors this year. Won't shock me if he retires after the season. But he does give us an insurance policy if we have any issues going forward. So still going to be figuring out the lineups and the exact roles for our pitchers over the next few days before the season actually gets underway. But I think we have made most of the tough decisions for this team as we sit here on March 26th, 2029. Just 3 days away from the start of the regular season at our division rival Rangers. So in our next episode, we'll let you know what the 26-man roster ultimately looked like, check in on what we did with our pitching staff and what we did in terms of our lineups, and get a brand new season underway. And importantly, we'll also see what the preseason projections for this Oakland team are. It's been a rough playthrough for us so far. Feel like on paper this is the best team we've ever had. We've been between 72 and 80 wins in each of our 5 seasons in Oakland, so we have made progress from where this team was when we took them over, but it is time to get this team over 500, and I'm cautiously optimistic that with the moves we've made this past offseason, this may finally be our opportunity to do that. And we'll find out how the season starts in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.